Hello, and welcome to your first session for virtual learning. In today's session, we're going to be talking about creating a positive online culture. My name is Heather Hilz-Fitzgerald, and I'm here within the Romoland School District. You will also have access to this slide deck within the Google Classroom. And just remember that many of the images and or highlighted text are going to be hyperlinked resources. So let's go ahead and get into this. So as we begin to come back during this fall for school, many new realities may be upon us. Virtual learning and or hybrid options may be the only instructional options available, and therefore troubleshooting and working towards perfecting this online pedagogy will be of the utmost importance. So reflecting on the closures we previously had in March, we see that there are some concerns we may have when we're returning. And in order to create a successful virtual model, we will need to conquer these areas. Some of the concerns previously mentioned at the beginning of the closures was providing support to families, being able to assist families with the tools and guidance needed to be successful facilitators of learning at home. Teachers also voiced the inconsistency of participation and a deeper understanding of home life and the skills the students have to self-monitor their own learning and study habits. Well, these can be a determining factor for the motivation that students have with online learning. And lastly, we really do need to keep in consideration what families need in order to be successful during this time, whether it's that social emotional support, flexibility, and even consistency. We see that as educators, we are doing more than just teaching academics at this time, but truly nurturing the whole child. And so that's why today our topic that we're going to be focusing on is culture. So our session is going to focus on two main groups. And so one of them is going to be our students, as for obvious reasons, because at this moment of time, our job as educators is in the grand scheme, just to provide these positive outlets for our students while we continue to social distance and create safe environments. The other group that we're going to be focusing on is just as important, and that is of our families. And due to the fact that our families will be participating greatly in their students' learning at home, we will need to learn to bridge that learning component to the home life from our virtual standpoint. And that's in order to, best meet the needs of our students. And so how can we be successful in both of these? Well, we do this by developing a positive culture. Since school closures in March, we have seen an extreme transition of education, where students have needed to be self-sufficient, self-motivated, and strategic in accessing their own learning. A recent publishing from Google Education has directed our attention to give students more agency over their education, and from what they learn to how the classroom operates. So just giving them a role in the learning that's taking place, giving them a role in how they want to learn is going to be extremely important, especially when they're going to be in a home setting where they won't have that direct access to a teacher on a daily basis. So that being said, as we move into more of an online learning environment, we're really going to need to look at each individual child and see what their needs are. And that, in a sense, is truly building positive culture because it focuses on what makes a child motivated. It engages them. We understand what challenges them and what we need to do to support them. So that being said, it truly doesn't mean making individualized lessons for each child, but really being able to be flexible and provide options and accommodate to each learner based on their needs and abilities. And so if you get a chance, that Google for Education logo right there is a hyperlink within your Google slide deck. and they have just a really great overview of what the future trends of a classroom will look like on a global standpoint. So, how do we first instill that deep connection to our students? And ultimately, we see a consistent trend when educators are coming together during distance learning to talk about what are the key ways to keep your students connected, and that's ultimately just through communication. From many experts, they state that having that clear communication with students on a daily basis is ultimately the most crucial and vital component to keeping students engaged and motivated within their academics. Ultimately, the teacher's presence is extremely vital. So that being said, the teacher, through Google Meets on a daily basis, are there to not only make those connections with students to talk or to share, but this is where teachers are going to be able to provide purposeful and meaningful instruction on a daily basis. And that being said, we also can see that the Google Meets can be used as opportunities to create intervention-like experiences with setting up designated times for small groups. But just being able to create that consistent instructional plan as to when all students will receive grade level instruction and to keep a consistent small group instruction schedule is going to be important, and it's going to be something that students and families rely upon. Another suggestion for teachers would also be to schedule a day where one-on-one meets could even take place so that you're getting that direct feedback to students in real time. And if for some reason you didn't have the opportunity to meet with all students that day, scheduling issues, whatever it may be, you could even use programs like Screencastify or Flipgrid to record yourself giving them a detailed note that's personalized to them. When we meet with our students, one of the most important things that is going to be relevant at the beginning of the school year is beginning to gauge how the students are feeling and what's really going on at home. Are they going to be up to the challenge to, put themselves out there and work virtually within this online setting? And so one idea to present is having students fill out a feeling chart at the beginning of some of your Google Meets. And that way you can go ahead and gauge to see how students are feeling that day, and possibly in that moment be able to decide if you need to restructure your lesson and or activities in order for them to best receive them. So the mood meter shown here is a great way to incorporate that selection of feelings. And if you click on the link above, you can learn more about facilitating the activity. Another option to stay connected with how your students are feeling or what is going on in their lives, and even considered to be a great tool for an attendance tracker, is that of Google Forms. So I'm going to go ahead and move out of presentation mode. It'll probably lag just a bit. Okay, we're back in. So I wanted to go ahead and review this example down below. This is from a 5th grade teacher over at Boulder Ridge Elementary, Erin Lozano. And during her time with the COVID closures, she would push out either a daily or a weekly check-in with students. And obviously you notice that everything is completely private so that other students aren't accessing what students might be submitting. But she just checked in to see how their home life is, how they were feeling, possible things that they're doing outside of school and how those made them feel, and then maybe just a snippet of what they were able to do over the weekend. Something simple, something just for students to feel that they're being heard, that they are welcomed, and gives you as a teacher such great data back on to how you can make the learning positive and accessible for each of those students. So now I'm going to go back into presentation mode. One moment. So that being said, let's go ahead and look at the first few days of school. Previously, we had the luxury of setting up our first days of school together and allowing for those hands-on activities to take place. This is where we saw our go-to activities like getting to know you bingo or the spaghetti tower challenge. I know that was always a fun one in my class. But now if we're transitioning to an online setting, how are we going to be able to recreate those fun and engaging community building activities with your class in order to establish the trust, the motivation, and connection in a virtual learning model? And if we reflect on our recent closures, we as educators know that we've already created and established many great community building activities and engagement opportunities. We were using those when we first had to fall upon distance learning. So reflecting on those ideas that you used in previous months, or maybe even sharing with team members what they have done, or looking into online professional learning networks is a perfect way to get students excited about attending a virtual setting by using activities that are tested and true. So as I progress through the rest of the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and just give some ideas or suggestions of ways to help support building that culture in the classroom as we transition into a virtual world. The first suggestion I have is to really go in and check out the EduProtocols book, book 1, because in the beginning of that book, it outlines everything. It focuses around culture and how to develop that within the first few days or a couple of weeks of school. And in there, you'll find activities and strategies that will support students to not only share about themselves, but gives them the ability to share with others and understand others, collaborate with others, and in that, you're going to be able to learn a lot more about your students. So our Google Drive shared EduProtocol folder contains all of the digital templates that you're going to need to set up the engaging first day and or for the rest of the week. All of these can be totally modified and or adapted to your own classroom. Therefore, they work for the littles, and then they also work all the way up to our 8th graders. And also really looking at this book as a way to start translating our teaching into more of a digital component. EduProtocols is an amazing pedagogy that will allow you to provide instructional strategies in a virtual setting. So feel free to review the book and find ways to support student learning. And it does support all subject areas. So that's one good tip. Another important aspect of keeping everyone in the loop and to understand your expectations, establishing those guidelines and routines, it's also a great activity at the beginning of the year to come together and develop shared norms. So students are going to need direction, and so by collaborating with them on what the skills they will need to be successful and hearing their perspectives of learning online, you can find that Establishing norms will guide the classroom in a positive manner for the entire year. This also may be an area that you would want to include your parents in too. That way, all parties are aware of what a day may look like or even the entire week. So, having that collective buy in from everyone really keeps everybody on the same page and makes your online learning move and work a lot more smoothly. Another great activity to have your classroom engage in within the first week would be to develop a class mission statement. Some of our schools within the district are Leader in Me schools, and that is usually an activity that takes place early on in the year. Collaboratively, students and teacher craft their wants, their goals, and dreams for the school year and create a common language amongst the classroom. I know before stepping out of the classroom for myself, I felt that our classroom mission statement was an extremely valuable tool all year long. There's always those times in the year where it seems a little bit more of a struggle to get through, but for some reason, whenever we would come back together as a class to reflect on our mission statement, we would begin to realize what were the goals and dreams that we were set out to do. And then from there, having some really great discussion as how we would work through maybe some of the issues we were having. And from there, move on to a more proactive mindset. Another spin to this classroom mission statement would also possibly be having students create their own mission statements. I mean, if you think about the writing that could be produced by expressing their beliefs of education and what matters most to them, that really is definitely something that is a very meaningful and very important component to having our students understand that their education and what they're doing in education matters. So this idea here is all about personalities, and this is a great area for students to help secure the sense of identity and would also help ignite the opportunity for them to understand oneself. So the personality test is a perfect activity that allows for students to explore who they are. The Myers and Briggs personality test is probably the most common one that you will find. And so sometimes it might be a little bit more rigorous for the littles, but there's definitely ways that you can search online to find things that are much more user-friendly based on your grade level. If you're a teacher within 4th to 8th grade, though, I do highly suggest having them take the 16personalities.com test. It allows for students to pull up an entire page that reflects on their individualized personality. It even assigns them a little character and then even makes connections to famous people with their type of personality. And when this activity takes place, I see this as a way to also connect to many of other subject areas. So based on their personality type, maybe they could write a narrative about the opposite personality of them. Or this could be a great math opportunity for charting data based on how many introverts there are in the class compared to extroverts. And just think about science and social studies and how much more inquiry type of research they could do with this information. The last suggested culture building activity that I have just really works for all ages, and it ultimately is having students narrow down their values. This is a great way to bring positivity to the class on the very first day. So in this activity, we see that students are given the opportunity to fine-tune what they believe in. At the end of activity, they're left with their 5 core values. And once they've completed those values, it is a great opportunity for students to reflect on why they chose them. So this could be done orally or through some type of written form. And then maybe possibly later on sharing those out with others. Could even have this translated into some type of an art project or set them up for poetry writing. And all of those could be quite valuable extensions to this activity. So now that you've had an opportunity to see different ideas on how we can build community and build culture in the classroom and really support student identity within the classroom, a great way to collect all of that data would be to then house it somewhere so that they could cherish the findings of themselves. And so digital portfolios are a great way to display that work and any other work that takes place within the school year. So there's lots of ways to develop digital portfolios. You could use programs like Seesaw, especially for our littles. You could also use Google Apps such as Google Slides or Google Docs to go ahead and hyperlink or attach images into a curated piece of work from all different subject areas or from all different project areas that they are doing throughout the year. But one relatively easy way to house their products of learning is using Google Sites. So many students are intuitive to this simple platform or may just need a simple walkthrough to get started. Not only can they save their individualized exploration of themselves within these pages, but then it is a great place to go ahead and house some of their final work, such as written pieces, or maybe they've created some type of project that's related to math, or they've created some type of a digital art project. This is a great place to house all that work and then have students go back and reflect on the things that they've done within the school year. I also used to like to include my students' goal setting sheets within this. I usually used Google Slides to keep track of their iReady diagnostics as well as their AR progress throughout the year. And so having this placed within the Google site will allow them to reflect and find it easily. So now that we've covered our most important element to our careers, which is our students, we then follow right back up with the other group that's just as equally as important. So what has been a dramatically important component to our distance learning at this time has been the connection that we need with families. And so now more than ever, we need to support them. With the use of technology, we can help develop relationships that will connect the importance of learning to the home setting. Again, with the similar theme to our students, communication is key. Daily communication may be one of the best tools we have to keep connected to families while in a virtual setting. So familiar apps that many of you probably already know are Remind, Dojo, and Seesaw. These keep parents connected and in the know of what students are expected to be doing, how parents can support, and it gives seamless opportunities for teachers and guardians to have that two-way communication. Another idea is to even kick off the school year with a family Google Meet. Here, you can meet your families, share about yourself, play games, and discuss what are the wants and needs for this school year. And this could be a great opportunity for that establishing norms activity as well, so that we can provide those expectations, guidelines, and rules right at the get-go, and therefore have a very nice transition into the rest of the school year. Besides the daily simple check-in, being able to front load parents as to what the week might entail is also a really great engagement strategy. A teacher friend of mine, Kim Vogie, shared with me at the beginning of the week, she would usually screencastify her weekly learning plan. And that way she could give a brief overview of what assignments would be due, and also give any supportive or helpful suggestions. And then her parents could access on their own time that recording. She usually housed her learning plans within Google Slides, so it was an easy way for her to record and show a visual of the progression of the week and or the assignments. But just being prepared, being organized, and being transparent with parents will ultimately lead to the success of the students. Another idea to keep everyone on the same page would be to also provide frequent surveys to check in with families, to see what's working, to see what changes may need to happen, or just to be an ear to hear what is going on in their life. And that way, you as an educator can help families and be able to adapt or modify when necessary in order to make everyone successful. So overall, we see that first and foremost, having teacher presence is key to online learning success. Teachers are there to drive the instruction, monitor students' progress, provide intervention and or support, because this new academic year needs to provide learning for our students to be successful. And in order to receive that engagement and participation, we must be welcoming, accommodating, and flexible in how we support each individual child. So establishing those relationships with the families and students will pay off in the long run. And that ultimately ends our first webinar session. And so there is going to be a follow-up Google Classroom that you will need to complete in order for this module to be completed. So I'm going to go ahead and show where you can access that. Give it a moment. It is lagging. Okay. So once you're in your Romoland Virtual Learning PD Hub, you're going to go into your classwork section. And this is the best way to access any classwork, and just showing as well, keeping things organized in topics for your students when you do establish your Google Classroom is the best bet for them to be able to find and access things. So once you're done with this webinar, remember that we were in session 1. The slide deck, if needed, to go back and refer to or access any of those hyperlinks is here for you. And then there's going to be 2 parts for this assignment. The first part is going to have you actually work through the top 5 values activity. And so you are going to be narrowing down your top 5 values within this document. You can feel free to modify or change it as you would like, and then eventually use it in your own classroom. So you go ahead, check off 25 of the values, circle the top 10, then rank those from 10 to 1, and then finally narrow down the 5. When you've done that, the second part of this is going to include actually an EduProtocol instructional strategy called Thin Slides. And by the way, this is a great instructional strategy for any subject area that allows for students to reflect on any recent learning. And so the thin slide will allow for you to simply place in a value within the slide and then also incorporate a picture into that slide. And I apologize for this loading issue. Patience, right? Patience. And we're back. So you'll notice that the slide deck does include the same instructions here on slide 2. Placing your value within each deck and incorporating some type of an image here that reflects that value. Thank you again for joining us for session number 1, and good luck on your assignment.